And we're live. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, my friends. Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of 40 Going on 4, the show that helps you reconnect with that inner child who once took those magic markers, scribbled all over the walls, destroyed the fine china, and left an absolute tornado of crazy in their wake. But enough about my nieces and nephews. We're not here to talk about them today. We're here to talk about bringing that inner child to work. We have not talked about that yet on this show, and I'm really excited to do it because we have the very best guest on this big spinning rock to talk about just that. Today, I have the great Dan Smolen with me. Dan is the host of the What's Your Work Fit show. Dan, what's happening, brother?
I'm confused. I thought I was having a video interview for the Program Manager 2 slot at Amazon. Are you not my video interviewer?
I don't live in Arlington anymore, man. That ship has sailed. That's done. We're not going back to those dark days.
Okay. Okay.
And for those of you who don't know, Dan is my neighbor here in the greater DC metro area, where we are all now just on the, how shall we put this delicately, the Jeff Bezos farm. And it's a very exciting place to be. The national bird of Virginia now is a crane.
You're right. Oh my gosh, yes.
Happy Friday to our dear friends up north, James and Patrick, who've melded like this Frankenstein's experiment into like James Patrick. They're like, it's like a thing now. And I'm very happy to have them here.
Happy Friday, gentlemen. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, one and all. Hey, Horn, what are you up to down there in Charlotte today? What's happening with you? What's cooking? And all the rest of you out there, drop it in the chat. Where are you joining us from today? I know you're from all over the world. We got folks coming in today from the most exotic place on this planet, Oklahoma. It's going to be a great show.
Wow.
It's going to be a great show.
Halfway across the world.
I'm telling you, man. So, Dan, I want to kick this right off here with a question for you, brother. What did 4-year-old Dan want to be when he grew up?
You know, this one put my mother nearly in therapy.
Nearly?
So, yeah. Oh, wait till you hear about this, because in the you know the typical things, and you're in your kindergarten classroom and the kindergarten teacher said, "Hey Jeff, tell me about what you wanted to be when you're all grown up." And I'm sure Jeff said an astrophysicist, or a neurosurgeon, or, well, today he'd probably say a social media top influencer with 2 million likes across several platforms.
On the topic of neuroscience.
On the topic of neuroscience.
And astrophysics.
Right. But 4-year-old me had a different tack, and let me explain it. I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, and in a ranch home. And my window faced the side street. And every afternoon around, about 2:30, 3 o'clock, a garbage truck would pull up, and these two very jolly guys would jump off, and they're high-fiving each other. And they're emptying all the trash out of my dad's garbage cans. By the way, denting the crap out of them, and the lid and everything. And, backslapping each other. And I told my mother, I want to be a garbage collector. And she was like, don't say anything. You'll embarrass the family. But I'll tell you what I connected with, Jeff. I looked at those guys and I saw happiness. I saw joy. They seemed to be happy. They might have been heavily medicated, heavily lubricated from hooch. But little kids, when they're asked that question, what they say they want to do really isn't important. What they want is to be happy, because that's what little kids thrive on. That's how they learn. That's how they discover friendships. It's through happiness. It's through joy. It's through bliss. So, sorry, Mom, for all these years you had to hide in the closet out of shame that your dear youngest child wanted to be a garbage collector.
Sorry for just that?
Yeah, really.
I feel like you have a laundry list of stuff, man.
Oh, yeah, man, she's got grievances. But the thing is that I have learned so many years later that it really was about joy. I mean, come to think of it, I never heard any of my friends say, I want to be a I want to be an actuarial expert like my dad, who works for an insurance company in Hartford, Connecticut.
We had different friends.
Yeah, we did. You know, it wasn't the job. And okay, so maybe somebody sees an influencer on social media and says, I want to have 2.1 million likes. I think when you're 4 years old, you just see this person happy and engaged and having a blast with other people. And it's really about bliss. Oh my God, it is about bliss, Jeff.
It is. It really is. So what happens, man? Like what happens? Because we're so wired toward this as kids. We want bliss, we want joy, we want adventure. And then we're like, well, no, I'd rather just be a senior manager of marketing.
Well,
And
what
screw the
what
bliss or
happens?
pleasure. Like just
What happens is that you and I both went through junior high school, and oh my God,
yes, we did.
nothing more soul crushing or career aspirational crushing than junior high school, or now middle school, as they have rebranded.
Yes.
For these times we live in. So what happens in middle school is now we have to fulfill all the demands of No Child Left Behind, and we have to teach to the test, and we have to get really proficient on BS that we will never need to know about in our life and careers. And there's no time really left for career exploration. Very few middle school programs do career exploration well. And that is a national tragedy. And the reason I say that is because when you were in 6th and 7th and 8th grade, your brain is still a sponge. You are still very accepting of new ideas and new experiences. So for the communities out there that do career exploration in the school systems, they choose a favorite. In my former community of Stafford County, Virginia, it was aerospace. I'm not really sure how the community as such could support that. I mean, we were not close to NASA by any sorts of the word. The closest NASA launch facility is probably 4 hours away in Wallops Island. So I don't understand how that happens. What we instead should be doing is playing off that idea of joy and working with the local companies that are out there. They're doing cool things.
And some of them are.
And do what I call a career petting zoo, right? Where you go to spend more than an afternoon, like an extended period of time with a buddy in a company, kind of learning about clean energy or, neuroscience or, well, let's face it, AI. I mean, there's just going to be a ton of new jobs out there. And if we can just keep that joy going, because you know what ends up happening? We respond to the test. We get very good at useless BS knowledge that we'll never use again. We don't believe in ourselves. We lost that sense of bliss. And oh, by the way, now we graduate from college or university, we're terrified because what if I don't get a job? What if I don't get in this career path that I've spent, learning about? And we've done ourselves a great disservice. We've done our kids a great disservice that we don't value joy first, right?
We value being on the conveyor belt, like the beer factory in Laverne and Shirley. They put the things on and you just kind of send them through, and you get packaged and bottled and sent back out there. And now it's how do I get best drunk as this beer from Milwaukee, rather than how can I be the most interesting, creative with floral notes of hoppy. Which is disgusting, by the way. Don't drink IPAs. Don't do it, folks. This is a friendly message from me to you. Don't do it. But if you want to do it for the sake of creativity, if your joy brings you to that, then do it, right? And that's what it's about, because everybody has a different point of joy. Now this is the real question, right? How do we get that back? We are at work every day. We're doing our thing. And it doesn't even matter if you're working for somebody or you have your own business, which, by the way, Anybody out there ever thinking about starting your own business because you don't want a boss anymore? You're trading one boss for 1,000 bosses. So everybody's got a boss.
This is not a new idea. This goes
Yeah.
pre-industrial age, when people learned to trade. And usually they learn to trade at the feet of their dads or mothers, in some cases, whereby, the dad trained their children. And so that started with, look what I'm doing. Look at the beautiful things I'm making. Look at what I'm rendering. And I think, to a certain degree, that still held case, even though in many places there wasn't a lot of joy externally.
Not particularly.
My family got thrown out of, the Pale of Settlement in Middle Europe 100 and some odd years ago, even though my grandfather, at the feet of his father, learned how to be a confectioner. And he loved it.
Well, okay. For the folks back home, what in God's name is a confectioner?
They made candy.
Okay. Did anybody else know that in the comments? Did anybody else know that a confectioner makes candy, or am I just the ignorant one here? Which is totally cool. I'm the ignorant one in a lot of different forums, especially at a Sanskrit history symposium. Like, I'm the guy who knows no Sanskrit, but I show up anyway because what the hell? It's interesting, right?
In the part of Ukraine where my family was from, there was massive sugar beet production. Well, they had to do something with the sugar beets besides render borscht. They made candy. And what's a more wonderful expression of love than candy, right?
There's none on the planet.
My grandfather didn't do that as a career. He came to this country. I mean, he tried being a candy maker in Boston for a little time, and then he left and he moved to New Haven, Connecticut, and became a furniture retailer. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that back in the old places, the joy of the guild, the joy of learning a trade, and all the practices that go into that, often very kind practices. Here's how I lovingly create this candy swirl. That's this type of stuff my grandfather learned as a little kid back in the old country, right? We don't do that. We don't do that anymore.
We don't. Where's the love, man? Where's the love? Everybody in the comments, where is the love?
And okay, and here's the practical part of that. We stopped making stuff in this country, and we started creating Program Manager 2 to work at Amazon. We created a service class. Nothing wrong with that, but along the way we lost that old guild mentality, that old guild love of learning a trade, but learning that there was a lot of love in it.
Do you think we've lost the creativity too? Because I feel like in a lot of organizations, particularly in the more old school, rigid corporate.
I kind of lost you, Jeff.
How we do it. This is what, okay.
Can you try again? I lost your audio.
Oh no, that's not good.
Can't hear you, Jeff.
Oh, all right. Here's what's happening right now, folks. We have a Comcast issue in the area. So I'm going to point the finger outward, but also back at me because the wall unit's not working the way it does. This is what Accountability 101 looks like. You got a great experience for your folks right there. This is a learning moment. It's a learning moment.
Repeat your question. Repeat your question, because I'm sure it was, I'm sure it was really profound.
Not at all. But I'm going to repeat it anyway because you asked and because I like you, because you're a buddy of mine. And for everybody out there who may not have heard it either. So the question I'm asking is really this. If we are to regain that joy, to bring that inner child back into harmony with what we do for a living, what's one thing we can do every day? Because I think we look at this holistically. We look at it from a 30,000 foot, what can we do every single day to bring a little bit of that joy back into work?
Well, learn to be a creator like you and me. We're doing live shows every week. There's something about creative expression that enmeshes itself beautifully into a blissful work experience. Gosh, I love doing my live show. It just feels so in the moment real and beautiful, right? And also, people that aren't full-time creators can still be part-time creators. How else would you explain the explosion of business on Etsy and on some of these other sites where in their free time people are making stuff out of wood and creating furniture and jewelry? Like my wife, she's a full-time teacher, and yet on the weekends she sells vintage clothes and also jewelry that she makes. We have this, I think, untapped potential to create, and maybe will get us back to that guild class era where we created beautiful things that withstood time, right?
We really did. I feel like in a lot of ways, particularly the culture now, and people love to point fingers at it. I get it, but so I'm not going to pile on. What the hell? I'll pile on.
Yeah, right.
You know, I feel like things have. I'd love to get your perspective on this, and everybody in the comments too. Let's see where you're coming from on this. But it feels like a lot of what we produce, and this is not just from a clothing point of view, and not just from like the trinkets and the tchotchkes, but also from our movies and our music. I feel like there's been this kind of reversion to the mean, this kind of very mass-produced base. What's the cheapest, quickest, easiest way we can reach the most amount of people, and we've lost that quality, like you said, that attention to the guild itself,
Right.
that masterful like craftsmanship of wow, what a movie that was. Wow, what a piece of clothing that was. What a song that was.
So how do
How
we
do we
get
get that back?
How do we get that back?
Yeah.
We consciously, if we're looking to support people like that, we shop locally, right? I love shopping locally. I live in Manassas, Virginia. It's got this wonderful hometown feel, and I love shopping at the local shops. They have so much pride in what they do, and many of them create their own merchandise, right?
They do.
Candles and furniture and jewelry and clothing items and objet d'art, art, beauty. I think that's how we do it. And I think we have to learn to be more intentional about supporting not only people that create stuff, but you and I have talked about this, create experience. Honor people who are in the arts, who perform for a living. Pay for a performance of something that maybe they're workshopping. Because when you do that, it'll get them to something bigger and better.
Every time. Now, this is a really good piece I want to springboard from.
All
We
right.
talk about art.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people would not consider themselves to be an artist when they are, because I think everything is art. I think life is art. Love is art. Everything is art. The art of teaching, the art of being, the art of dreaming, the art of doing, everything is an art. And it doesn't matter what we do for a living. And you could be that Amazon drone, not an actual drone. Well, hell, that's kind of an art too, actually. That's kind of interesting. You could do anything, but what you're doing is you're bringing in art to what you do. So how do we lean in to the art of what we do, even if you don't look at it as per se, art?
I think you look beyond it being a utility, beyond it being a job that is remunerative, that pays you money, because anything can do that. I mean, you could work for a service company but even if you work at Amazon, and I one of my dearest friends and former recruits in the recruiting business is a senior executive at Amazon, and he loves it. And the reason why Brian loves it is that he feels he is being creative. He gets to use the creative skills that he probably started using as a 4-year-old, like I did, like you did, to engage better with his team members, to come up with more novel experiences for the people that purchase the products in his sector. Yeah, even if you're working for a big company, you can still do it. And I'll tell you something, when you do achieve that, you're going to be happier in your career. Your boss is going to be happier because their investment in you is going to be enriched. Your lifetime value in the work that you do will be extended. So whatever you happen to do, my brother tells this story. One of his dear friends, now departed, was a was a philosopher of Hindu and Buddhist philosophy. Pretty heady stuff. His career was being a toll collector on the New York State Thruway. I mean, he worked overnights and he loved it
Yeah.
because he could read all night. It was the least used exit on on the New York State Thruway. And I said to my brother, that had to be tough. It gets really cold in the winter. He goes, no, he shuts the door. He had a little space heater and he was in his bliss because he got to read pretty much uninterrupted for minutes at a time, or he could keep his thoughts straight. And he found bliss in that. Can you imagine?
I love that. I love that so much. There was a character in The Path to Perfectia named, it was a bit character. He showed up for a split second named Marcus, and he was a bartender. And he bartended at the favorite watering hole of the characters in the book. And
Yeah.
Marcus bartended at night to make ends meet so he could do what he loved during the day, which was to write fantasy novels.
Yeah.
And part of what fueled the characters in the fantasy novels were the people that came into the bar every night. If anybody here has ever been to a bar in New York City, you know it is basically a Tolkien novel. Anytime you walk it, the characters are under themselves. So he leaned into it and he loved it. Didn't seem laborious. Like, this is my jam. This is my thing.
Oh my God, you mentioned bartenders. You made me think of Dave Matthews. Dave Matthews of Dave Matthews Band, before he became the brand that he is, world beloved, he was a bartender in Charlottesville. And most of the stories that he wrote, most of the songs that he wrote were based on actual characters that were belly up at the bar, and they would tell these intensely personal stories about their lives and their desires and their missed opportunities and their regrets and so forth. So I agree with that. Absolutely.
And I feel like every day we can be the bartenders of our own businesses and our own companies.
Yeah.
Because aside from, just getting all of our clients drunk, which, has its moments too,
Yeah.
there's an opportunity to learn about people's life stories, to learn about their struggles, to learn about their hopes and dreams and desires and wants and everything that comes along with the tapestry of human experience. What a gift we have when we get to interact with people. Like on your show, you have the most interesting guests on, and the conversations you guys have are amazing.
My wife came out of theater before she became a school teacher, and she's always reminding me to break the fourth wall and draw people in, because the intimacy of the conversations that we have, and by extension, Jeff, what you do. And this is why people join your show. It's because they feel like they're part of it. They're part of an experience. That's joyful.
I love this motley crew.
Yeah, right.
It's we always got a great rogues gallery in the comments, and I love each and every one of them. It's a great community we have. Like you said, it's a chance to draw them in, because this show it's their show. It's not my show. I'm a conduit for this. This is 40 going on 4. I look at it as our show, and I'm just the vessel to kind of breathe it into life. But it's a chance for us all to, once or twice a week, to dig back into our own inner children and start thinking about that. Like, God, how can we bring that back into our lives?
Yeah, and how many people do you know? I can count tons of people that I know who reach 50, 60, 70 full of regret that they didn't do X, Y, or Z. And that's a cautionary tale. And to even if you are 50, 60, or 70, you can still have those childlike blissful moments, right? Throwing your grandchild into the ocean for the first time and saying to him, okay, when you hit the water and when the wave hits you, I want you to scream at the top of your lungs, and the kid does exactly what you tell him to do. And you bask in the beauty of that, right? And I just love moments like that, where people who have been sucked into a career that just consumes them during the day, that they have enough sense to say, okay, this is my time. I'm going to take my grandson or granddaughter out to the water, to the ocean for the first time. And I'm going to make sure somebody's videotaping this, because I know in 20 years' time, when they lament to their own parents, oh, I had the toughest life and I never had any enjoyable moments. And then you play the video of them squealing with total reckless abandon. And you're like, oh yeah, I was happy. That was happiness, right? That's what I live for. That's what I live for. right?
That's awesome, man. That's amazing. There's something so rejuvenating about that, the childlike spirit you get around kids. And I think sometimes though we fall into the trap of outsourcing that just to the kids. Where, I want to be around the kids, my nieces, nephews, kids, grandkids, so I can feel young again. Well, how do you feel young again without them? That's the real challenge. And I put that challenge out there to everybody watching. How can you do that without outsourcing it to actual kids? How do you find the kid within you to light that up?
Well, I'm lucky. I am part of a community, a summer camp community that I've been associated with since I was 10 years old, when I was first a camper at the summer camp in Connecticut. And we have kept a group of alumni from that era, 600 plus strong, as if we never left the campus. And what keeps us young, what keeps us tied to being little kids, is going back in time and remembering all the joy that we have and somehow dovetailing it into our own experience now.
Love
And
it.
what's so amazing about that, Jeff, and we haven't talked about the work that I've done throughout my career, but as somebody who's involved in career development, it's having a community like that and looking to see how successful people have been because they somehow were able to keep the joy in their lives. I mean, we amongst the people in our community are a former lieutenant governor of Kentucky, um, countless surgeons and doctors and nurses and actors and voice actors and scholars, people who were tenured professors at top universities, and legal experts. I mean, one of our alumni is current. I'm not going to mention his name, but he's currently on CNN offering legal perspective. And now, this season, one of them's going to be a contestant on Survivor on CBS. She was
That's
my
amazing.
she was my daughter's counselor when my daughter was 8 years old, and she's the same person. And I'm lucky because I have that experience. I regret that not everybody has that universally. But even if you don't, find some people that you can gather with together and be subversive, be silly, go
Yeah.
against the conventional grain, do something crazy, go on a road trip. You know?
Lean into that fire that's burning inside of you because everybody has it. If that fire was completely gone, you wouldn't be here anymore. That chi is still flowing within you.
That's
It's
right.
still there.
That's right.
And
That's
rock
right.
and roll, just take it and run and do something with it.
I'm
It's
curious to know
still
what
there.
I'm curious to know what our audience thinks about all of this. Um,
Yeah.
you
Drop
know,
it in. And I have a prompt for everybody here. What was the best job you ever had? Maybe it's what you're doing now. Maybe you have to write that now because your boss is watching an
yeah.
HR like a hawk. And they're zooming in on you and they're making sure that you're not going to divert off the path they've laid out for you. But ultimately, what was the best job you ever had out there? Let's start with you. Dan, what was the best job you ever had?
Well, I kind of teed it up. I never thought it would be this because I started my career in broadcasting, went into the ad agency space, which I loved, and then I got into recruiting. I was a headhunter for 20 years. The first 7 working with a good friend of mine, the following 13 under my own company banner. This is what I loved about it, Jeff. At the end of the day, I felt like I positively changed someone's life. Now, that could be a little conceited, right? Yeah, I got to place somebody in a job, but you know what? When when I still hear from people today saying how much they appreciated working with me and the opportunities I brought to them, I saw something in them that went beyond the job spec. I knew something about them that was a unique value proposition that I could go to the hiring manager and say, "You're not going to read this in the resume, but let me tell you about Stu. This is what Stu has done." And then to be able to work in a flower shop in high school, I love that. I love
Angela,
that.
that's amazing.
Angela, what did you love about that? What did you
Yeah.
love
What
about that?
lit you up about the flower shop?
I mean, were you an arranger? Did you work with people who had special life events going on. Tell us. I want to know, what is it about working in that flower shop that lit your fire, and also, what are you doing now?
Yeah. Now Angela's got a great show too. Definitely check out Angela's podcast, and she does it as it's a 2-woman team, and her and her partner in crime, Dana. Definitely check it out. It's a super super cool podcast. So Angela, drop it in the comments, and we have the. This is perfectly said. I won't repeat it because we're going to get banned on YouTube. But this is it. Yes.
Yeah, I nearly got banned on TikTok earlier this week. I could tell you about that if you're so. Shameless plug, but also do Soaring Profits, because we get to explore the stories of people changing the world. I love that. I love that, James and Patrick.
Yes, these guys are awesome. That's another absolutely fantastic thing they're doing over there. Soaring Profits, check them out. And then, of course, check out Going Commando. And this is one I didn't want to repeat out loud because
that's too much information. Too much information.
That's why I wanted you to drop it in the comments, but I couldn't resist saying it. It's a cool name, and I dig it. That's the cool thing about, I think, 2020 is that nobody ever really knew, did they?
No, and a lot of them became podcasters, and they kind of discovered their own truth, their own bliss.
Yeah. When we're because you can only see us from the chest up and all these things. So I feel like we were joking about this yesterday on LinkedIn. I feel like we truly pivoted to the new normal in those unprecedented times of no pants. And
can I tell you what got me into trouble this week with the Chinese overlords at TikTok?
I would love to know what got you in trouble with our Chinese overlords.
So last week we did a show on what is Return to the Office really about, and we got into a segment that was from MSNBC's Morning Joe with Donnie Deutsch, famous ad guy, who's now a podcaster. And I love Donnie, but I don't ascribe to his ideas about return to office or return to the past. Okay. So he talked about this junk research which he considered legitimate about how people are, let me see if how 12% drink during the day when they work from home, 10% have afternoon delight, and 72% are doing household chores, 33% are running errands, 53% are watching a movie, and 1 out of 7 are working 3 to 4 hours a day. And like, my BSO meter went off, and I went, oh come on. I've worked from a remote office for nearly 27 years, and so we talked about it on the show, and I was like, I've got to extend out this thread. So here's what I did, audience. And you tell me if the Chinese overlords kind of stepped on themselves banning my video.
Here we go.
Set up a camera in my bathroom. I created a big bubble bath, got into the bathtub, set the frame so that it was, no man boobs, real tight over me, but you could see like bubble bath, and I'm washing my hair, and I'm doing
You're looking good, man.
And I'm doing my spiel, and I'm like, I'm working. It might be 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm taking some time to take a bath because you know what, my back hurts, but I'm also relaxing, and I am, I'm going to go back to work, and I'll probably end up working today, probably more than 12 hours. But part of my workday is I get to take some intentional time to go do something I need to do. It's not going to take long, but it's going to be very meaningful to me. I'm going to come back more rested and refreshed and so forth. Put the video up. Boom. Okay. I'm getting like tons of response. All of a sudden, and warning, Will Robinson. They took my video down because it was inappropriate. Okay, tell me why. Because this middle-aged, not in the greatest shape, white guy is sitting in a bathtub. Do you find that offensive? I'll tell you what I find.
I have my own reasons.
I'll tell you what I find offensive. They allowed a video of an adult dog urinating all over his owner's kitchen floor. That was gross. Why do I want to see that? But they didn't ban that, but they banned me because somebody's going to get triggered and they're going to find that find that, displeasing or something. So I'm curious to know. Oh, so I ended up putting the audio portion of the video up under color bars like they show, before a show goes live. And I put that up and they didn't stop it, but I was like, oh, come on, please. I'm trying to make a point here, not about me taking a bath. It's about me finding joy in the day so that I'm not working nonstop in a total time suck experience.
I'm going to put a provocative comment, a provocative banner, which is going to lead on to this, but I want everybody's honest opinion
Yeah.
about this because I feel like we've broached this now and there's no turning back. So we're just
No,
going
there's
to do
no
this. Okay.
trouble talk. Yeah. No kidding, Lonnie.
All right. So we talked about this on your show.
Yeah.
And we talked about the companies that are saying, we found out that people are doing this during the day. This is a catastrophe. And then I put my contrarian comment, of course, that why is that a catastrophe? If they're working from home, they're getting the job done. What's the fundamental problem? So, folks, I put this out to you in the comments. Afternoon delight at work, yay or nay. Now, as a qualifier, we are talking about working from home. So this is not like an in-office situation because it's an HR nightmare and whatever. Okay. What are your thoughts? Drop in the comments.
I'm not going to step on any of the thoughts, but let's just say there's historical precedent for this in the workplace, and especially in my former space of the ad agency experience. You're gonna tell me that during a very extended lunch hour something like that didn't happen? Really?
At an ad agency.
Have you seen Mad Men?
Spent 3 summers on Wall Street, man. It was an absolute zoo in there, and don't even get me started on my years in sales. God, I mean, it was like somebody airlifted the seediest casino in Vegas and dropped it in Tyson's Corner. And
oh yeah,
as animals run amok. I mean, but this comes back to the central idea. We laugh about this kind of stuff, and we think this is crazy, and we think it's out of bounds. But there is an element of if you're joyful, you will work better. You'll do everything better. But
we're not machines. And oh, by the way, let's talk about that aspect of it, which is while our blissful dreams got crushed in middle school by not having those career petting zoos, we also got introduced to intramural sports. And what is the thread of metaphors that we heard, Jeff? We heard play hurt. Don't leave anything on the field. Take one for the team. Give everything to the team, right? And how many of us have through our careers heard all that metaphorical mishigas come up in our work settings, so that if you're young in the workplace, and I know when I ended up being the last person to leave, so that the following day, the graybeard in senior management said, I like the cut of his jib. I like that he's putting everything on the field. Now, mind you, I was married, and it meant that I wasn't getting to spend time with my wife, who I adore, right? But we have to disabuse ourselves of the notion that we have to be on all the time, crushing it nonstop, because our brains are not wired that way. That kind of activity works off of cortisol or cortisone. Yep. It works off of fight or flight mechanisms, which are meant for you to get the hell out of the way of the saber-toothed tiger. But it doesn't, it drops off, and then you crash. And then you do really stupid stuff and make bad mistakes at the office because you're fatigued, because you didn't turn on the off switch or the dimmer.
There's always a dimmer.
Yeah.
There's always a dimmer. How many times have you seen a colleague at 2:30 in the afternoon, they just got back from Subway and they had one of those big meatball subs? They look absolutely comatose at their desk.
Well, I'm old enough to remember that in my first set of jobs, the senior managers had sofas in their offices, which usually after a 3 martini lunch was the place where they slept it off for maybe an hour or so. So even
why don't we normalize that?
Right. But
I'm serious.
But is that crushing it? So that's a little bit of a hypocrisy if you ask me. Those same people who were, probably played varsity ball for an Ivy League school or whatever, and 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 they're telling everybody to go do this. They're not even following their own mantras.
No, they never are. They never are. And the, the crushing thing is interesting. Now, when I say normalize it, not normalizing necessarily the 3 martini lunch. We're not trying to normalize functional alcoholism on this show. What we're trying to normalize is the idea of the afternoon siesta, because that is something that, in the Northern European work ethic that migrated over here, that's haram. We don't even talk about that. But in many parts of the world, that's quite normal. And it's normal not because it's some employee perk, it's because people understand physiochemistry, and they understand that if the human body can recharge, it can actually get back into a state of crushing it and into a state of motivation.
I mean, Mediterranean, Southern European countries have been doing this for millennia because it works.
Yeah.
So why all of a sudden is that not appropriate? I mean, we should have the utility to downtime as much as we need to. As much as we need to. If that means going and taking a book and going to a park bench, leaving your technology behind and just be present in the moment. Find some meaningfulness in the moment and then go back. I
Yeah.
guarantee you're going to be a lot better and have better output than if you're just crushing it nonstop 12 hours. Because I'll tell you what, that put me in the chiropractor's table for weeks on end.
Anybody out there also have traps that are just ready to explode after typing all day because you're hunched over, it's the worst, absolute worst for your traps, worst for your upper back, terrible for your posture, for your spine, for everything. Keeps chiropractors in business, I'll give them that, but otherwise,
Before we had speakerphones, I had the phone with the neoprene on the receiver, the neoprene thing that would, yeah, but you're still like this. And my chiropractor would say to me, how do you take phone calls? Like this? Yeah. Don't do that.
no. I like getting my adjustments every 4 to 6 weeks because it almost feels like I'm going in for a needed wrestling match where he's like flying in off the top ropes with the elbow and cracking me there and mangling me, but it feels good afterwards. I'm not gonna lie, it feels pretty good.
Well, all work did make me a dull boy, Lonnie Ray.
It does.
Because I would go gather with friends on the weekend exhausted, and they would say to me, "What's going on in your life?" And oh, by the way, they would do the same thing. We would go into our work speak.
And I mean, oh God, this is why at the beginning of the year I started this thing called the not working experience, and it was really just because
Yeah.
everybody, especially, and better than
Mm.
anybody in the DC area, the hyper obsession with what do you do as the first question you get, and not just at a networking event, but in every social setting, everywhere you go, getting a cup of coffee, grocery store, getting a massage. When you get mugged, somebody puts a gun in your face, like, hey, by the way, before what do you do? Just curious.
Yeah.
Do we know the same people?
You
It's like,
look like a GS-15 to you, to
yeah,
me.
right. It's just so
Especially,
woven into the DNA here.
you're absolutely right, and it's not just a DC thing. It's in New York. It's in
Yeah.
LA. It's even in Minnesota and in Chicago, but it's not in Europe. And boy, Marcia and I, my wife, we went on a vacation 4 years ago to the Netherlands, and somebody on our tour uh, asked one of the locals, "What do you do?" And I went, "Oh, geez, here it comes." It didn't get received well. That's why they call us ugly Americans, because it's like, oh, you think you're so superior because you make work everything.
Some
And
do
you
actually.
and, and you know what, in Europe, for the most part, when you gather with people you don't know, even with people when you do know them, you don't really talk about work. You talk about experience beyond the work, which is, tell me about your life. What's a day like for you?
Yeah. What do
Um,
you love?
when you're not in this beautiful country, which you call home, where do you go travel? What's your favorite color?
It's a great question. It's a great question. What's your favorite color? Simple as that, because it gets their mind thinking differently. They're not used to being asked that question.
It's not like in Monty Python where you can change your mind, go blue, no yellow. But I mean, the beauty of it is that anybody can answer it. whether they be the Uber driver that picked you up, by the Via della Rosa, or the flower merchant that you met in Covent Garden in London, or the little kid who, you know, is admiring your iPhone 15. What's your favorite color, little kid?
Yeah.
You end up getting honest answers.
Let me ask
Beautiful.
you a question then. Let's pretend I've never met you before, Dan
Right.
Smolen. I have no idea who you are. And the first thing I want to know, I reach out
Mutual
to you.
funds. Mutual funds.
Mutual funds always comes back to the
Right.
damn mutual funds.
Right.
I can't get away from this.
Right. What do you want to know?
I want to know. I'm looking you right in the eye, shaking your hand, and said, Dan Smolen, tell me, what do you love?
I love a beautiful sunset. Oh my God, there's nothing like it. It's like a symphony. And I don't know if you went outside a couple of weeks ago when we had the sky turned orange around the DC area. It was
Yep.
from the outer bands of that hurricane. I had my phone in my pocket. I took pictures. They're just, I was in my bliss. Oh my God, I want to capture this moment. And I go back to those photos I took all the time. I mean, how does the sky create those colors? I wasn't thinking about, I got to send out an email. I need to connect with somebody who's on the West Coast. It's 7:50 at night. The sky is a color like I've never seen before, and that's all I'm thinking about. I am in that moment. That's what I love. I love
That's
sunsets.
beautiful. That's beautiful. It's an appreciation of splendor and grandeur and majesty in its purest form that requires nothing from you. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to talk to anybody. You don't have to put anything into motion. You just need to be.
You know what? Also, I'll tell
That's
you
it.
what I also love. I love communal dining.
Mm,
Yeah,
okay.
you and I probably grew up in the same kind of experience where the family never left the table, but oh my God, the conversations that would flow out of that. The most fun I've ever had was communal dining in Italy. And here you are with around all these people, most of whom spoke English pretty well, so I wasn't at a total disadvantage. The conversation was just astonishing. Um, I mean, there weren't any Nobel laureates at the table, but they lived lives of beauty and purpose, and it was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I'm meeting this guy from Zwolle in the Netherlands, and he's telling me about what a day is like for him. And I'm like, wow.
What a perspective you're getting illuminated with. And friends in the comments asking you right now, what do you love? What do
Yeah.
you love? Could be anything. Curious. Give us a window into your soul. What do you love?
I'm guessing Lonnie Ray loves like uh, unbridled laughter, like just completely crying, can't stop crying, laughing so hard at something that just happened that's so absurd, and she just got tickled. That's what I think Lonnie Ray is a good time.
I don't think you're wrong. I know what Lonnie doesn't love. I know Lonnie doesn't love dumbasses.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that on my show too.
I
But no,
know. I know you are. I'm excited.
I'd rather not know the limiters. I'd rather know the expanders.
That's just it. Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's like what do you love? James Patrick, that's very kind of you, gentlemen.
Hey, it's
Appreciate you
not my dinner with Andre, James, and Patrick, but it's still pretty cool.
guys. Authenticity. Yeah. Angela, you are authentic. Like, that radiates forward from what you're putting out there. And we feel that. And that's what's awesome. And there's something you really connect with on that. It's like you're not getting any BS, you're not getting any pretense. I love that too. I love authenticity. Dan, where you at on that?
Oh, how could you not? I mean, we have friends here. We got to have dinner at her home, and I didn't know a lot about this woman. And it turns out that she was um, escaped out of Vietnam right after Saigon fell. And she was a little kid, And I'm listening to her tell this. I didn't know any of this. I just thought she just was my wife's coworker and she's really cool. And sitting there in rapt attention, listening to her describe being a 4-year-old child with a shaved head. Jeff, the reason for this shaved head is that the parents were consumed that their children, their little girls would be sold into the sex trades. And so they had to make her look like a little boy and 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 dress her in a way that wouldn't cause attention.
Mm.
Well, she and so many others, I mean, her family stayed intact, a miracle. But they came to this country and they lived the wonderful American dream like no other. They developed businesses. Um, she and her husband have raised two amazing children. You know, one of whom is 21 years old and is already in a grad school program. Brilliant kids. To have the opportunity to bear witness to somebody's soul like that, even though it wasn't joyful, it was authentic, like Angela relates to. That's what happens when you sit down with people and you don't know them and you open up your heart to their experience and they do the same for you.
It takes a while to get there, I think, for some of us, because that's a lot of conditioning, is that you have to judge them by what they do for a living, how much money they make, what's the appearance, what their background is, and how much of that jives with what you're allowed to like and what you're supposed to like. And once you start peeling back those layers, you can find something beautiful in pretty much anybody. And there's a great story everybody has to tell. And I get excited hearing about people's stories because everybody has this unique lens of perspective. There's no two perspectives that are identical.
And I'm going to add something too, because I know you will appreciate this. You've been out to the Hamptons many times, I'm sure. You grew up in Queens and Long Island and so forth, and as did my wife. And um, we happened to many years ago spend a lot of time out in the Hamptons. We got to know a lot of very quote unquote successful people. And when you cut through the veneer of it all, I've never met a more miserable, longing bunch of people who are so encumbered by the fact that they've got to look a certain way, they got to hang out with a certain kind of people, and they're freaking miserable. I would rather be living within my means or below my means in a one-bedroom apartment and not have all that baggage. And to that end, I grew up with a friend. I'm not going to mention his name, but he grew up in his father was the CEO of a major company, and we were friends from college. And he lived in a mansion. Actually, he didn't live in the mansion. He got to live in the carriage house, which was itself 3,000 square feet. He had it all to himself. Stunning, stunning place, both the main house and where he lived. But what really saddened me, Jeff, was that despite all of the wealth and the trappings, I've never met a sadder group of people who were so detached from one another, and they were all family members. And I'm like, that was an early lesson to say, I'd rather be um, I'd rather be of limited means, but be able to control my bliss than to feel that I have to look the part and drive the expensive car and have the weekend house in East Hampton, which, oh, by the way, I get to fly by helicopter from Teterboro to go to every weekend, so I avoid the traffic on the LIE. What is that? How did we get there?
I don't know, man. I mean, I think it all came from this idea of what making it looks like. And it's all a trauma response to generations of lack and of oppression and poverty and
Yeah,
hunger and all these things. So eventually, as the trauma response is, we are going to be successful materially to
I agree
never
with
go
that.
through that again.
I agree
And then
with that.
what happens, right? We find ourselves down this path now where this is what we've identified as success. And we've equated it with happiness. Not the same thing, but we've equated one with the other.
Mm.
And they say, as long as you have, and if you like, your family came from the Pale of Settlement. And, the idea back then is as long as we have food in our belly, we're happy. That wasn't always the case.
Well,
What
and
we did,
so many of those, my grandfather came over alone. Um, and what's interesting, Jeff, and I've never really talked about this publicly. He had 8 siblings. His parents were still alive when he left Ukraine in 1912, and he came over to the United States alone with lint in his pockets. Now, my grandfather probably gave him enough money to make passage and so forth. I don't know the exact circumstances of my grandfather's rapid skedaddle out of Ukraine, but I would have to guess it was to avoid conscription, because Jewish boys of that age got put on the front lines of the Tsar's army, and there was a north of a 25% mortality rate. And my grandfather looked at that and probably said, to his own father, "Papa, get me the F out of here." And
peace out. It's been real.
Peace out.
Yeah.
Now, I talked about my great-grandfather being a confectioner. He was, by all means, a very successful man in his village. He cared well for his family. Nobody starved at night. They dressed beautifully. My great aunts and great uncles, who I never met, they looked like they were well cared for. My grandfather never spoke of the circumstances behind leaving and coming to this country, which took such good care of him. And within 25, 26 years of his arrival, he built a custom home in New Haven, Connecticut, where I'm from, sent his oldest child to Wellesley College, which is really astonishing, and would end up building a home for my dad and my mother and my family. I mean, he was the embodiment of the American dream. What I didn't know is that he bottled up the trauma of all that, and I never knew what happened to my family over there. But I have come to a very sobering reckoning that they perished, not in the death camps, but in what's called the Holocaust of bullets, when the Nazi Einsatzgruppen invaded Ukraine and basically mowed down whole villages or shtetls, killed people in open pits with rifle fire, destroyed any record of their ever existing. We can't find anything. I can't find anybody on 23andMe. And I've had to come to this recollection that my grandfather, the love that my great-grandfather and great-grandmother had for him, to say, Shrull, that was his name, that was his Russian name back then, Shrull, go to America, go.
Yeah.
And he
Get
did.
out, man. Get out.
And he did, and he honored them by living a wonderful life. And yet the downside of that was, at what expense? What did they give up? They gave up their lives.
That's a profound moral dilemma and ethical dilemma when we think about that.
Yeah.
Is, you're sacrificing for life, but are you really sacrificing for life? This is interesting. This is something that a lot of us wrestled with in 2020 specifically. And I know Lonnie has very strong thoughts on this. Lonnie has strong thoughts on everything, which is why I love you, Lonnie. Mwah.
Yeah.
We had to wrestle with this idea of life versus living.
Yes.
And this became the central ethical dilemma of the entire year. And people had very strong emotions on both sides of it. Some would say that, living is irrelevant if there isn't life. Or some would say life isn't relevant if there isn't living.
I subscribe to the latter.
So, yeah, and I do as well. But I know I understand both perspectives of it. And I have a lot of friends on both sides of the divide on it. And it's something that we constantly wrestle with. And this is where the work conversation, I think, is so central to this, because this is a dilemma people face all the time when they work jobs that are well-paying, that are stable, good benefits. I mean, at least the illusion of stability. No job's ever really stable, but
no.
The sense of, this is a good paycheck and it gives me a roof over my kid's head and it puts food on the table and it keeps the utilities flowing. So am I miserable in it? Yeah. But it's making sure my kids aren't out on the street. Yeah. So people wrestle. Now, I don't believe in the either or. I think there's a third way and a better way, but this is the paradigm we're locked in. How do we break that kind of thinking?
Well, I think we have to define success within our own terms. And I think I've talked to you about this before. So much of my early career where I said, for me to be successful is to do the following things. And when I happened to be 27, 28 years old, I was in an eminently successful marketing executive in a huge marketing advertising firm with a huge client, which I had responsibility for much of what the agency did for that client, to the point of nearly 13% of the annual billings of the agency passed through me. And somebody higher up came to me and said, "We are so proud of you. Look what you're doing. You're only 27, 28 years old." And I got to tell you, Jeff, that was a reckoning, because it was like, wait a minute, whose success is that anyway? Is that mine? Or is that yours? Is that your model? Because here's the thing, I was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. If I didn't get my work done, which was usually financial, getting all the billing clocked, I ended up coming in on the weekends. I missed so much. I missed so much because of that. And oh, by the way, because I lived 40 miles away from my workplace and there was no mass transit to get me there quickly, I drove. I had to drive. Our company was in a wooded part of Greenwich, Connecticut. I had to drive there on highways. It was 38 miles each way. Um, and I would have to leave before sunup so that I beat the traffic in. And I would have to leave well beyond sundown so I could beat the traffic home. I
That's
would
fun
get
in the
home,
winter.
rinse and repeat every day. And so by the time I got to Friday, I was numb. And but I had all these trappings. I had all the success around me, and I was like, wow, but I was miserable. And I think the cautionary tale to people now is own what it means for you to be successful. Don't let anybody tell you what it should be. If your idea of success is to have the kind of life where you have choices, where you can say to a boss, if you work to a boss, I need to block out the following amount of time. It's personal. And maybe you tell them what it's for. Maybe it's because my daughter is going to be a ballerina in Swan Lake and she's 5 years old. And this is the coolest thing that she's ever thought about. And I want to be there and I want to see it. Or I want to take my daughter to swim practice. Or I want to get my hair cut. Or I want to meet the love of my life for an extended lunch al fresco in a beautiful restaurant. Or I just want to work in my garden. So this is the wraparound of what's your work fit, which is to say, how do we make work a wonderful part of a day, doing other wonderful things, and not the all-consuming time suck of a day, which, by the way, was my experience as a young executive, and by all accounts successful, but deep within me, traumatized. Traumatized.
Yeah. Got that t-shirt, man. I should get it. I should just get a t-shirt say work traumatized. That would make a fortune, actually. We could
it would,
retire next
because
year.
you know what? When I came up with the show, I can't tell you how many people come up to me and say, I'm going to watch, I'm going to listen because, and then they tell me some little cautionary tale about their rise up the ladder, which didn't work out the way everybody told them it would.
Yeah, we're sold this bill of goods about how it's supposed to be. And, if we keep our head down and mouth shut and get this entire path, you marry this person, it's laid out for us. And then we get in and we realize it's an illusion. The whole thing is a house of cards. It's a big mirage. But we find ourselves trapped by it because we trap ourselves into it, because we believe it. We reinforce the narrative in our own minds, and we measure success by how well we're living according to that template, not by how passionately we're following our heart. And imagine if we could start making, I'll use this word again. You guys know I hate this word, but I'll use it. If we start making the pivot back to a heart-centered existence of what makes us truly happy and fulfilled and joyful, not how well we follow the template that's been laid out for us. Yeah. Man, that's where the magic springs from. That's where all the miracles start flowing.
And that's really what it is. You've heard this old saw about the person who's on their deathbed, and they say, you never hear anybody say, I wish I could have worked harder. I think people work pretty hard. What they don't do well, because they're allowing others to frame their success frames, is to live.
Yes.
Is to feel. You often hear about people who, and this is so sad, who are so traumatized that they literally cut themselves. They cut their forearms and their skin. And why do they do it? Because they want to feel something. They are so sensory deprived from trauma, and that unfolds into work as well. I'm gonna soldier down. I'm gonna hunker down. I'm gonna put my head down. I'm gonna push through this. I got to tell you, it doesn't always end well. They often end up getting cast off because they think they're okay, but they're messing up on the job because they're not sleeping, they're not taking care of themselves, and they're not heart-centered, as you say.
They're not. There was reminds me of some buddies I had back in Michigan, and these guys grew up in very repressed environments, religiously repressed environments, and one of them ended up starting an underground fight club in his basement. And the guys used to go down there and just beat the absolute hell out of each other. And because it had to go somewhere.
But I think that's why that movie resonated so well with
people.
It
was a real life fight club these guys did. I thought it was just a movie, but that's what it was. It was a resonance of like, wait, this is tapping into something.
Yeah.
Something deep here.
I do not feel, therefore I gotta punch and be punched.
Right. Yeah. I mean, who would willingly... I understand boxers do it. They get paid a handsome sum for it. I understand that. Why would you willingly take body blows and blows to the face for no money? That part I've never been able to square around logically, but then you realize it's not coming from a logical, rational, well thought out, well, this makes sense place. It's coming from I need to feel something and to feel alive. Yeah. Why do people have affairs that can blow up their entire life? It's the same idea. Why do people do anything that can blow up their entire life? They want to feel alive. Yeah. And of course we judge it. I look at the stupid decision. Yeah, that's all cultural programming. But at the end of the day, why? That as I get older, the question of why becomes so much more pertinent to me about all human behavior. 10, 20, 30 years ago, I just judge everything. Well, they did that because that. Why? And once you start scratching that ticket, you start seeing what's underneath, and it's quite revealing, actually. It's pretty interesting. So, Dan, I'm going to ask you a couple questions I'd like to ask everybody. So we start with a big question, then we go on to a bigger question. So we'll start with the big question, which is, what do you believe the meaning of life is?
The meaning of life is death, because without death, there is no life. Now, I know that's going to sound really head-scratchingly arcane, but every year I reconcile with the fact that at one point I am going to die. And what am I going to leave behind? And the meaning of life is my quest, albeit very imperfect, to do right by others, to do right by my family, hopefully so that they do right by me and honor me well. Most importantly, for me, the meaning of life is to do things that work towards healing the world. And that's a broad palette. Doctors get into healing the world to cure cancer, especially childhood cancer. People who get in the legal profession for righteousness, to take care of people that they themselves cannot stand up for themselves in a court of law, so they are going to do something. Maybe it's a scientist who wants to figure out how do we mitigate climate change, but more importantly, how do we figure out how to grow food in places where there's food deserts? It's a broad palette, and I would suppose for some people that's their meaning of life.
Yeah.
they want to leave it better off than where they started it, or perhaps not make it worse.
I love that. It's raising the consciousness of the world around you while you're here. And I think everybody who lives and breathes on this planet has an opportunity to create a better world in their little nook of it through whatever it is. And I've received some pushback on this when people will say, well, what about people who are, for lack of a better term, complete invalids? They can't eat on their own and they can't speak. They have no agency. I said, well, they can do a profoundly important job. By simply existing, they can teach others compassion.
Yes.
That is a profoundly impactful way to live.
Yes.
And everybody can play their part in doing this. So I think that's a beautiful perspective, my friend, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I have an even bigger question to ask you. Diet Coke or Dr. Pepper? Where do you fall on this?
Oof. I don't drink soda. We never had it in the household.
Okay. I mean, this is the question. This is the burning question the sages have been wrestling with.
First of all, in my household, if we ever had soda, it had real sugar in it. And second of all, it meant that company was coming over. So I mean, we used to have real Coke, with
I know.
you'd have to use it'd come in the wood tray, and you'd have to literally pry open the top. You couldn't twist it off.
Oh yeah, it was a whole thing.
My lubrication of choice is an unsweet iced tea, maybe with a little bit of lemon in it, or better yet, it's a freshly brewed pot of mint tea with real fresh mint, not the dried kind. That to me is an experience. Diet Coke or Dr. Pepper? Oh, God,
I know. I had to ask us. People want to know, man. It's for the viewers.
I just can't.
And for everybody out there, I would highly recommend you connect with Dan on LinkedIn. It's Dan Smolen. Check out his website, dansmolen.com. If you have an opportunity, Dan is somebody you'll want to know. I'll tell you this from firsthand experience. Dan's a great soul. This is a man you need to know.
Thank you, Jeff. For your viewers, so if you go to dansmolen.com, the first thing you'll see is probably past episodes of the audio portion of my live show. But you can navigate through and you can find where you can watch What's Your Work Fit live to see guests like Jeff and others, and Lonnie Ray coming up on the platform of your choice. For most people, it's LinkedIn. For others, it's Facebook Live. But we also simulcast on the What's Your Work Fit YouTube channel, which is pretty cool. Love to have you, and love to have you participate live with our guests.
Come on out. It's a great show. You will get a ton of great stuff from it. That is a promise. So, Dan, my friend, thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming out today. Everybody in the comments, I love you all. Thank you so much for joining today. Keep building this community. Again, this is our show. This is our time together. And I'm so grateful for it. So, have a wonderful weekend,
everybody. Back at you, my brother. I love you.
Enjoy it.